On the third bite of October, we're gonna have some monsters because, games are much more interesting when they have monsters and AI that's running around that you have to avoid, and it's also topical since we're talking about Halloween. Monsters are a part of that.
All right, today on the third bite of October, we are going to start adding some monsters, and you'll notice whatever weird gremlin haunting effect was on my voice is now gone. So I fixed that monster of audio problem, and now we are moving on to creating monsters in our game. That's a nice, perfect segue. Okay, so we're going to pick up right where we left off with the second screen here. We're going to we taught the character how to move around the screen. We taught him, okay, he's got to jump. He knows he's supposed to get things that are pink, and by now he should realize that these things that sort of use this pink sub palette are things that he can interact with in a positive way. Whereas, other colors will make sort of a negative, and he knows, so implicitly, subconsciously, he knows, well, as soon as he got this candy, he knew that, okay, this was also a safe thing because it used the same sort of color palette, right? And just like we know that the warm tones are generally things that we're supposed to be looking at to interact with, while the cooler tones in the background are things in the background that we cannot interact with. They're just there for sort of color and texture, right, of the narrative. So we want to continue on with that concept, and it's not going to be perfect, but as a general rule, we're going to keep things in the foreground that we can interact with are going to be this sort of warm tone, and the cooler tone are going to be the background things, and the things that we positively interact with will be sort of this pink color for the most part. Let's go over what we already know how to do, and let's make a new screen. So I'm going to click on Overworld. I'm going to come over here and I'm going to make a new screen, and I'm going to go and you can see the screen. We did this with the last session. You can see there we go. And then I'm going to use my 7 key to paint. Remember, your 6, 7, 8, 9 keys will paint based on the sub palette that you've got selected. This color, this color, this color, this color. Okay, great. Now I've got that. I'll go ahead and add collisions in the bottom. Now I might make some modifications to this screen, but to get started, I'm just going to easily make a very simple screen and come back over here. So now I've got a solid ground. This is where I want to add monsters, and I'm going to look a little bit at how the monsters work and how to add them and things like that. But what we're going to do is incredibly simple. So we've already created the monsters for this project. When you loaded the project, you already loaded a couple of monsters. And I want to talk about them a little bit. If I go into the monster graphics banks and I go into graphic bank 0 and I go into monsters, you can see I've got a jumping pumpkin, I've got skelly, I've got ghostly, and I've got patty. And why I made these sort of monsters, I mean, besides, being Halloween and all, is that we've got a monster that stays completely still. And then after a timer goes off, he jumps in the air. And so you can kind of gauge, when you have to go by him and things like that. Good for platforming, right? You have to time your movements. The next one is just a standard sort of patrolling back and forth monster. The third one moves in all directions and ignores solid collisions, can just move around the screen at random in 8 directions. And Batty is one that will just sort of go back and forth, but ignores gravity. So what we've got 4 different monsters that behave differently, that use almost the same couple of AI behaviors, but we're using them in different combinations, so we're able to get completely different feeling monsters. So on this screen, I'm going to add all of them first just to see what they all do. I'm going to get rid of them, and I'm going to probably stick with maybe just the patrolling monster. But I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to make a whole bunch of one of each of the monsters, and then check them out and see how they behave, just so I know. Just to keep myself safe, I know that this guy's going to be a patrolling guy, so I'm going to put one of these stumps right here, and I'm going to right click, modify the attribute, and make that solid. So that way I can put him over here and I'm not worried about him, running into me before I can actually analyze what's happening on the screen. All right, now to add monsters, the thing is that we've got a bunch of different tile sets for monsters as well. So you don't have to do this, but if I go to Pixel Editor and I load one of my tile sets, one of my graphics pages, you'll see I've got one called monster_0, that's bank 0, and tile set 00. So if I take a look at that, this is the tile set. Now, usually background tiles do not use, sprite tiles, objects don't use background palettes. They use monster palettes. And what I'm looking at right now is it through red, green, blue mode. And I want to look at it through my enable palette translation. And I want to, this is one of the most confusing things, it seems, for newcomers. And I want to go over it very clearly. And it has to do with the color of the monsters. I want you to really understand how it works. First of all, know that no matter what colors I color here, I'm really doing this. I'm really setting values. It doesn't matter what color this is set to. And that's one of the reasons why it's good to see this black, red, green, blue value, because it doesn't matter what palette I set this to. These guys are going to show up exactly the same because this is the data that's actually getting written. It's more like a paint by number. It's saying, okay, this is a value 0, this is a value 1, this is a value 2, and this is a value 3. And then whatever palette I'm putting them through, that's what is going to that's the color that it'll show up. The problem is I'm not determining the actual colors here in the drawing. I'm determining those values, like I said, but I'm determining what colors. What a lot of people will do is they'll choose the palette they want and they'll enable palette translation so they can see, okay, if I were to be using this palette, this is what this guy would look like. But really, again, this is what's actually being drawn. It's not actually drawing anything that's containing color data. Okay, so why do I say that? Let's jump over to the pumpkin because this is what I want the pumpkin to look like. So if I jump over to my jumping pumpkin and I can see, oh, he is that color. But it's important to know, right? Look at the sub palette that he's using. What I did was I set up 4 sub palettes for my screen. And this is generally how I do it. It's definitely not the way you have to do it. I'll put my player sub palettes here, my prizes or weapons or things like that that have to do with like my player or effects and stuff like that on sub palette 2. And then I've got 2 left over for monsters. So I can have 2 different sort of color sets for different style monsters. For instance, if I look over here, I can see that my, if I were to look at these, my pumpkin uses this orange one. My ghost uses this orange one. And then my bat and my skeleton use this blue one. And we haven't done anything with the spider yet. We're going to do that later when we deal with monsters a little bit more. But yeah, so the important thing to understand, though, is, again, this is not actually setting the color for this object. It's not. This is setting which one of the sub palettes, when loaded to the screen, is this going to use. So if I have this sub palette in slot 3, since this object, when I created it, I made it with this slot. You can see it's highlighted. I can see all my tiles are highlighted with this sub palette because when I created it, I clicked on this and I clicked on this and it went ahead and locked it in with that sub palette. If this is loaded on the screen into this slot, into these colors, this is what it's going to look like. However, if this is loaded into the screen, those are the colors it's going to be. It's not looking at the colors right now. It's looking at the slots. So it's looking at this slot or this slot or this slot or this slot, which sub palette. So I'm going to come back over here to my overworld. And if I were to backing up. If I were to go into my screen info, day monsters, this shows me the palettes right now that my screen actually has. You can see in my sub palette 3, it's not showing the orange. So right now, if I were to pull in monsters into this screen, the pumpkins would show up this color. If I want them, because this was the sub palette that I used, if I want them to use the pumpkin sub palette, I need to set this to the pumpkin sub palette. We're going to do it wrong for a second so you guys know how to fix it. Okay, we're going to come right back here. So I'm on my screen, and now I want to add monsters. I'll tell you the way to add a monster to a screen is you right click, and you should have a whole bunch of the ability to place objects and monsters, but I don't have it. And this might happen to you sometimes, and you're going to wonder, hey, why can't I put a monster here? Okay. The reason you can't put a monster there is because we haven't set up what group of monsters this screen is able to use. And what that does is to the engine, it tells it what tile set it uses. And then based on that, you can select different groupings of up to 4 different types of monsters. We have one monster group called all monsters right here. You can see it has one of each of them. I'm going to go back into my overworld. I'm going to go to that screen. And now I'm going to go to screen info. This time I'm actually going to functionally do the stuff. I'm going to go to day monsters, and I've got day monster group, and I'm going to choose all monsters. And now you can see exactly what I was talking about. This guy uses the third sub palette, which right now looks like this. And in fact, if I did this, it would look like these colors. This is what this object is using. This is what my player is using. If I were to set this, all of a sudden I would have a candy colored player because subpalette 1 is how I constructed my player. So what I want to do is I want to do this. I want to set my screen up so that subpalette 1 uses the player palette, subpalette 2 uses the candy palette, subpalette 3 uses the pumpkin palette, and subpalette 4 uses the bat palette. And these are the colors that I actually want to show up. So you can see I didn't actually set my colors on the pixel editor. I just set values 0, 1, 2, or 3 of the actual individual pixels. I didn't set my color when I was making the monster. I just said, do I want to use this subpalette, this subpalette, this subpalette, or this subpalette? And then here on the actual screen is where I determine which palette is being used for that monster. One of the trickier things for people to understand and get used to, and know that you've got to do this on every screen. So on every screen, you're going to have to tell it which types of monsters and what colors you want to set them to. I'm going to hit OK. And now that I've told it what monster group that I have, I can right click and I can place monsters or objects. And I'm going to place them out of order. I'm going to say monster number 1, I'm going to make this Skelly. So that's going to walk back and forth over here. Monster number 2, I'm going to put the pumpkin right on this stump here. And then monster number 3, I'll make him the ghost. And monster number 4 will be the bat that's running around. And so I'll have to watch my jump. And I haven't planned this at all. I just kind of want to see. So let me test my game. The AI for these characters already exist. And we're actually going to learn how to create a new tile in this script. And we're going to learn how to keep the skeleton sort of boxed in into an area, even if we don't have a solid tile there. So I'm going to go up there, I'm going to get this, and now all of a sudden I'm in the spooky graveyard with monsters. Oh no. And you can see they all have sort of different AI. So we've got a jumping pumpkin, we've got a walking skeleton, we've got the bat, and we've got the ghost. And if I run into any of them, I die and I go back to the beginning. Right, so it's very easy to add those monsters. Let me look under the hood real quick at their AI and how that's tethered up. So if I go into my jumping pumpkin, this is a great one because it also has multiple frames of multiple types of animation. I've got still and I've got him jumping. And so I need a state that he could be in when he's standing still and a state when he's jumping. And what I did was I went to manage animation and I added 2 different animations, still and jump. And so I've got still, and that's just 1 frame, and jump, and it's a different frame. So I've got 2 different types of animation. I went into object details, and I made 2 animation types, still and jump. And for all the still, I made still. For all the jump, I have jump. Notice I don't have directions with this guy. He doesn't change from right to left, so I didn't have to define a new animation over here for each, for like, hop left and hop right. He only hops up. There's no directionality to him. So it's always using the same animation if he's standing still, always using the same animation if he's jumping. Went into details, and he doesn't have a speed, but he does have a jump speed. And this AI does evaluate the jump speed, so I can make him jump higher or lower. I made it so that when he hits a solid object, he stops, and if he gets the edge, it stops. Really redundant, because this is never going to happen in this module because he doesn't move left or right. But just in case, good thing to set for monsters. I made it, give him a bounding box, and I usually try and keep the bottom pixel open, keep the bottom pixel free. That way, there's sort of a fun thing in the NES where it skips sort of a line, and so all your sprites draw a sprite, a pixel off. And if we place him, he might get stuck in the ground. So I always like to keep sort of a border around my characters. If anything, I cheat for the player and I make the bounding box a little bit smaller on monsters. But anyway, that's a whole other conversation for another time. This is the part that I really wanted to show. This is his action. So what this says is, on the first action step, this is a modular sort of AI behavior system. The action step number 1, notice his action is nothing. He's showing the animation of still, and his action is nothing. And there's a timer, and this is just sort of arbitrary ticks. It doesn't equate to seconds. So just try some different numbers here. Know that if you put 0, it's going to give you a random timer, which is kind of fun if you want to randomize, the behavior of some of the enemies. When this timer goes off, it does this end action routine. Now, right now, what this is telling me to do is advance. And so advance means it's going to go to the very next action step. It's going to go to here. Now it changes. It does the AI jump action. So it actually does something. When this action step is hit, it does a piece of code. And it changes to the animation type jump, and it sets an action timer to 4. And what happens when this action timer goes off? It goes to first, which means it comes right here. And so now we've got this looping sort of behavior where it's going to stay still, then it's going to change its animation, it's going to do this script AI jump, and then it's going to set this timer. When it's done jumping, it's going to go to here, and it's just going to repeat forever. I want to show you guys where to find these AI scripts, and it's in the same place that we found the tile scripts. So if I come over here and I look into my scripts, I went to the settings, I went to script settings, I scroll down, these are organized, and I can see eventually I'm going to get to AI behaviors. And here is where I have action behavior number 5, AI jump. If I edit this, you can see what it does is this actually just gives me a negative vertical speed. So actually, I was wrong before. This does not observe the jump speed. I can't make it jump higher and lower with the jump speed control. Otherwise, I would have to read the jump speed value for this type of object and then put it into my vertical speed. That's not what I'm doing. I'm actually, I'm sorry, I was incorrect. That's very scary. So what I'm actually doing is exactly the same thing I did for my trampoline jump. If you guys remember, I set a negative number and then I stored it into its vertical speed. Okay, now whatever object is loaded into the X register, we'll get into registers when we start talking about code a little bit more. Whatever object is currently loaded right now, I'm setting a negative number. I'm loading a negative number and storing it to its vertical speed. And that's what happens when this script is hit. Okay, very, very easy. So you know, based on the last step when we were messing around with this value and we were making it jump higher or not quite as high when I hit the trampoline, guess what? Same exact thing. I can make this guy jump higher or not as high just by changing this number. And there's a whole bunch of other things I could do with very little code too. Like I could give him sort of a random jump speed and give him a range where maybe he jumps at a different height, or could tether this to the jump speed in my UI. Maybe that's something we can do another day. But I want to look at another object's AI real quick, and that's this guy. Let me close this. Come back over here. Close this. So if I go over to my Skelly, this guy just moves back and forth like this. He moves left and right, random, and he loops forever, which means he's going to keep moving in that direction forever. He's never going to change direction unless he hits a solid object or the edge of the screen, in which case he's going to turn around and go the other direction. Now with this guy, if I look at my animation, if I look at my object, I've got walk right and walk left. But he's only got one animation type, and that's walking. He doesn't like walk and then stop and then jump and then shoot. He's only got one type of animation. He just has 2 directions for that. So when I went into manage animation, I've got walk right, walk left. That way I can show him walking right. This is a 4-frame animation. Walking left. This is a 4-frame animation. And if I go to object details, you can see I've just got one. And I just called it default. I didn't even rename, but I could rename it to walk if I wanted to. But what I really want to look at is right and left, because those are the only 2 directions that this AI can possibly go. And I changed my right direction when I'm in the default mode to walk right. And if my direction is left, I'm going to use the walk left animation. So those are 2 different back to back. Those are 2 different ways that we can manage our animations. With the jumping guy who actually changes animation per step, this guy has the exact same animation, but the direction actually determines which one he's showing based on what's in this interface right here. So anyway, this guy moves left and right. And to note, his AI is exactly the same. He does exactly the same thing. The only difference is this action step ignores gravity. So this bat can fly back and forth. What I could do is some really cool tricks with some more interesting characters, which we're going to deal with the spider, where I can ignore gravity for a little while, then I can then I can have it advance to the step and not ignore gravity, so it would fall, and then I could have it rise up until it hits a certain level, and then I could repeat the process. And that's kind of what we're going to do with the AI for the spider later on a little bit. Right now, what I want to do is I want to contain this guy in a certain area. So what I want to do is I want to, instead of having the stump here, I want to like go back and forth between, or maybe the bat. Maybe I want the bat to sort of fly in the same area, but I don't want this to be solid and I don't want it to be a jump tile. I don't want my player at all to interact with this. I just want the monster to interact with it. So I want to build what's, basically a monster block type tile. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to go into my settings and I'm going to go to project labels. You can see I have one called tile types. Now I've got a bunch of different tile types. I'm going to go to tile type 14 and I'm going to call this one monster block. Now this doesn't do anything. All this does, if I call this monster block, I hit close. Now, if I'll have to reset my screen, but if I come back in here and I look, I've got one called monster block. Now we know that this is tethered to the scripts. Do I have a script for monster block? Let me see. Script settings. Obviously, I do not. But if I look at tiles, I can see that tile type 14 is blank. So I am going to set this up to a new script that I'm going to write right now. I'm going to go to any of my other scripts that are in my platformer base files, and I'm going to hit edit. And the reason I'm going to do this is now if I make a new file, it puts it in the same directory when I save it. So I know it's going to be sitting right next to the rest of these tiles. It's going to be in game, mod, action, platformer based tiles, and then it's going to be called whatever I call this thing. This is my new script. I'm going to hit just a few semicolons so I can comment this out. And I can already see they didn't turn green, which means I know that they're not saved assembly language source file right now. So I'll give it a name. Just write anything in here that you want. I'm going to call this is my custom monster block file. Great. I'm going to save as. And this I need to change from a text file to an assembly language source file. And you'll all of a sudden, all the rest of your tile types will show up that are in the mod arcade platformer. I'm going to change this to monster block. Okay. So now what we have to do is we need to determine what type of object this is. And there's a couple different ways that we can do this. We can use the object flags. We can use what type of object it is. And we kind of saw this before. If we look at some of our other scripts, we can just look at this. And the first thing that we did with the trampoline is we compared it to a player object. And the player object is a very specific type of object. We're going to do a method that's just based on this. So you can learn sort of how to read this and rewrite it. But this is not going to be perfect because we're going to check to see if it's a player. And in this case, it's going to do nothing if it's a player. It's going to be just like a walkable tile. And if it's not a player, it's going to run into, or it's going to do the thing that we want to do, which is reverse the direction. Okay. And I'm not going to do this from memory. We're going to look at other scripts that do these things, and we're going to learn on like how to find some of this information. So the first thing I'm going to do is I want to compare what's an X, CPX to player one object. Right. And then I'm going to say, branch if it's equal to yes is player, so skip. Now I just made up that label. Doesn't mean anything, but I'm trying to write a label that I'm going to understand what this is doing. The only thing I want to interact with this monster block is the monster. So I'm going to enter down a few times and I'm going to write that label. Yes is player, so skip. And now inside of this, I'm going to tab in. And I'm going to write, okay, this means if it was the player, it's going to branch when it gets to here to here. So if it's not the player, it's going to continue on into the code. And then this means it is not a player. Later, we're going to have to edit this script again because we also are going to have a player weapon that we can shoot. And we don't want our player weapon to interact with us either. So this is probably not the most optimized way to do what we're about to do. We probably want to check to see if it is actually a monster. But for right now, we're just going to check the player because that's the only thing we have in our game. And we'll come back and we'll edit this later. So if it's a player, we're going to skip down here. If it's not the player, we want it to turn around. Well, how do I make something turn around? If you remember, if I come over if you remember, if I came over here into my object, I'm going to go back to that in a second. I went to Skelly and I looked at what happens when he runs into a solid object or an edge. He reversed his direction. That's effectively what I wanted to have happen. The only thing is I wanted to only happen to the monster, not if it's a player. Okay. Well, you know what? I don't need to know how to say that exactly. I can find that in my scripts. So if I come in here and I go down to AI behaviors, I can see I've got solid reactions. I want them to do exactly this thing. So let me hit edit on this, and all this stuff, this right here is the stuff that changes his direction right here. All this is the stuff that changes his direction. Now it looks like right here, Y is getting corrupted. My Y register is getting corrupted. So what that means is coming into this code and coming out of this code, it might end up being different unless I do this, which we're going to talk about right now. We're using something called the stack with this piece of code. We are taking Y for a second. We're moving the Y register and pushing it into the accumulator. That means we're taking the Y register and we're pushing it off to the side. We're saying, put this over here because I'm going to need to pick it up again in a second. Now we're corrupting Y all we want. We're messing with the Y value, the Y register all we want. And then at the very end of the code, I'm grabbing what's on that pile and putting it back into Y. So transferring Y into the accumulator, pushing the accumulator to the stack. So now that's off to the side. At the very end of all the code I want to do, I'm pulling what's on the stack and pushing it back into the Y register. So this right here is basically my turnaround script. So I can copy this, Control C, and I can come over here, and that's what I want to happen right here. I want to transfer Y to the accumulator and then push that accumulator into the stack. It might even be easier to see it like this. So I could see that this agrees with this. I'm pushing the Y and then I'm pulling the Y and putting it back. And then what I'm doing is I'm loading the direction and I'm just looking at the last 3 bits, which is direction down, down right, right, up, left, left, down left. There's 7 possible. All right, there's 8 possible starting with 0. So 0 through 7. I'm adding 4 to it because if I'm moving, if I look at this, I'm just, you don't have to write this, but down, 0 is down, 1 is down right, 2 is right, 3 is upright, 4 is up, 5 is up left, 6 is left, and 7 is down left. And then if I added 1 more, I'd be back to down again, right? So if I am moving to the right, I would add 4 and I would section off all the rest. So I could only get 8 values. I could only get 0 through 7. So what happens is I'm basically cutting off all the remainders. So if I take 2 and I add 4 to it, I get 6. So if I'm moving right, I get this. Okay, if I'm this and I cut off and I leave only these 3 bits and I don't think about anything that would be beyond this, I would go 1, 2, 3, 4. So if I'm left and I add 4 and then cut off, mask off the top bits, I start at left and I'd add 1, 2, 3, 4, and I'm back to right again. And now what I do is I look at there's some tables that exist under the hood that determine sort of which way I'm going to be facing, and that works with the animation system to know whether you're facing right or left or up or down or any of those directions. And then I OR that in, so that's this part, that's the rest of this byte, and that gets pushed in there, and then it stores it into my direction. So I've basically taken my direction, I've completely reoriented it to the opposite direction, I've stored it, and I didn't really have to know how to write any code. I just kind of had to know where to find that stuff. All right, so I'm going to save this. And now I've got a block that will make my monster turn around. Okay, so now I'm going to come back over here, and I need to go to that behavior. If I remember right, it was tile type number 14, and I don't have anything in there right now. And if I remember, I put it in the exact same place, so I could follow the same path. Base 4.5, game, mod action platformer, tiles, And instead of reset ammo, I'm looking for the one that is monster block. And you'll see when I double click it here, it shows up over here. And now that tile 14 that I called monster block will do that script that we just wrote. So I'm going to come back over here. I'm going to go in my overworld and I'm going to put my monster block right here. So I'm going to modify my attribute to monster block, modify this attribute to monster block. And now it's going to be, sorry, I'm going to hit collision. You can see he's going to go back and forth between these positions. So let me test that. And I'm going to get at my first screen. I'm going to get that. I'm just going to come over here. And look, he's going back and forth between those two positions. And if I get over there without dying, man, I made a hard little intro screen for monsters. Oh, no. Okay, try that one more time. In fact, you know what I'm going to do? I instead am going to put one right here, monster block, and I'll do a monster block right next to this bat right here. So it should go back and forth. Hopefully he won't be stuck inside that one. And I should be able to jump. And so that I can see where that monster block is, you can see where it is right here. I'm going to put one of the trees right under it just so I can easily see that, okay, it's right above that. I know that that's where the bat's going to stop and turn around. And if I jump through, I should be able to jump through it and my player will not interact with it whatsoever. It's just going to be an invisible boundary that only my monster is going to observe. And again, we're going to have to modify this a little bit later when we add our projectile because our projectile right now is not a player. So he goes back and forth. But if I jump, I don't interact with it at all. And that's exactly what we wanted. So awesome. Works. That is a quick look at some basics about adding some monsters and additionally adding a new tile type and even writing some assembly code. And instead of trying to have to write it over, all by yourself, which is terrifying, instead, you can look at some of the other scripts that exist and just knowing where to look helps a ton. So hopefully that's a little less scary and some of you guys feel a little bit more comfortable looking into the scripts and starting to try and read some. See you tomorrow.